Hi, I'm Jerry Lynn Weichel. This is Justine Mann. She is a school nurse sub, and she's also done med-surg and hospice and multiple other types of nursing. She's been a nurse for 18 years. So she has a lot of experience, which is why I chose her. Not to mention I just personally know her. And so, do I have your permission to put this on YouTube and use it for my classes and write a paper on it?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So, the interview questions that you suggested was, what do you think you can do in your leadership role to empower others?
In my leadership role, I would empower others by finding out what they're good at and facilitating that towards their patient care. On the med-surg unit I work at currently, we are in charge of ancillary staff such as transport aides, nursing assistants, phlebotomy technicians. The hospital I work at right now, there's a big change from 3 years ago where techs were and nursing assistants were just doing direct patient care. Now they do a lot more in terms of even using the glucometer, which they weren't allowed to do 3 years ago. So I like to find out what people do best and how they communicate best, and use that to make my patients' day a lot easier, a lot more comfortable, make them well informed of their procedures, find out what their issues are. If I need to, get somebody in there, one of my nursing assistants who have the gift of gab and they're just very pleasant, I may need to use them to ensure a patient that, family is coming who may be very anxious.
Okay. What is your definition of a servant leader? What does that mean to you?
A servant leader to me means somebody who can lead as well as assume the role of a floor nurse without crossing boundaries. I think it's very important for a charge nurse or a nursing supervisor to also understand the role of the floor nurse and not just dictate and run the floor, but be able to jump in there when there's help needed. It's very frustrating when you're working on a floor and you need extra staff and there is none, and you could use that person, that charge nurse on the floor more than you could use them sitting behind the desk. I've seen it in rare instances where there are rare people that will go in and jump in and do patient care and do a bed bath when they've been in the role of charge and nursing supervisor. So I think that's a very good role. I like the philosophy that I was taught. I'm not going to ask you to do something I wouldn't do myself. So if I ask my nursing assistant to do a bed bath, I'm willing to get in there and do a bed bath with my nursing assistant. If I ask my nursing assistant to take somebody to the bathroom, I'm willing to go into a room and take somebody to the bathroom. The current hospital I'm working at now has a no pass zone, which is really interesting. I wish they incorporated it years ago. If there's a call bell going off and you walk past that call bell and you don't answer it, you're fireable. You cannot pass a room with a call light on and not go in and acknowledge the light and acknowledge the patient. And it's not just, I will get your nurse. Unless it is something really rare, you have to address that patient. That patient wants food, you need to get it. That patient needs to go to the bathroom, you need to walk that patient to the bathroom. That patient wants you to make a phone call, you need to make a phone call. You can't just answer the bell and toss it to that nurse. Another interesting role that is in place now, which wasn't in place 3 years ago, is during a med pass. Nurses on a med pass are not allowed to be disturbed, ask questions, answer phone calls, facilitate questions from physicians. When you're on a med pass, you're on a med pass. You are dedicated to that med and that med cart, so you can't make mistakes, and there's no way you can be interrupted. I can't tell you how many countless times I'd be given one med and be called for another med, and I haven't even given the first med. So it's a really interesting role, and they do rotate each nurse giving meds. I think it's 2 at a time, so the other nurses have to cover the floors.
Okay. What do you consider your personal leadership strengths are?
My personal leadership strengths are I'm very organized. I like to be organized. I like to be on time. In a perfect world, none of that happens. I also like to make sure that I do my best to make sure a patient is spiritually taken care of and emotionally taken care of. If I need to make a phone call to see if something was done, then I do it. I particularly like working with social work and pastoral care. I don't think there's enough of that. I've seen too many instances when patients have request pastoral care and they can't be accommodated. A, because nobody's on the facility site. B, by the time somebody got there, it was too late. And D, they're overworked. There's not enough. You have the age of patients coming and quote unquote being dumped on site because they have no family to go home to. They have to go home to somebody who can take care of them or a facility that they can afford, covered by insurance, or that will take them, which is very hard in today's, economic and health environment with health insurance.
So when you are over a nurse aide, or if you have the duties of charge for the day, what role do you allow those staff members to play in collaborating decisions on how to best take care of patients or organize the floor plan or however it is the staffing?
I will generally let them do their thing. I like to prompt people by saying, okay, what would you do in that situation? Have you thought about this? And most importantly, I ask, what can I help with? Especially new nurses or nurses going back into the field, which I'm one of them after 3 years. It's overwhelming. You feel like you're a brand new nurse again. So somebody just saying, okay, have you thought about this? And did you do that? And don't forget this. And most importantly, what can I do to help you? Is a lot. It's a lot. Takes a lot of your worries off, and it gives you better patient care.
Okay. The next question is, do you allow for staff members to meet their full potential? And I'm sure that you do, but and when you do this, how do you accomplish that? How do you aid them into meeting their full potential?
I personally, when I'm working with a nursing assistant, they don't know me, I don't know them. The nurse is ultimately responsible for everybody under them. So if somebody doesn't do something, it comes down to your license and you. I do double check because you can't take people on their word for anything. I want to make sure my patient is taken care of. I want to make sure my patient was walked to the bathroom. I want to make sure my patient wasn't dumped there, and especially with wounds, I want to make sure that I visualize that. If my nursing assistant's telling me there's a sacral ulcer, I better get in there and I better look at it with them. I can't trust their word on it. It needs to be measured. It needs to be documented. My documentation is going to protect me, and them reporting something to me and not documenting it with my eyes, myself, lands you in it gives you a big hole for litigation and other issues. So once I trust in somebody, yes, I will, say, okay, have you thought about this? If I have a nursing assistant I know is going to nursing school, I ask them where they are in their care. I'll try to say, okay, have you seen this? Have you seen that? And try to get them to start thinking about their next level in their education development that they want to be at. I also try to make them aware of different things. Ethnicity and cultural awareness are a big deal in the hospital. You can get into a lot of conflict, and I've seen it if you're not totally open to that and aware. I will usually ask a patient questions. If I'm unaware of something, I'll say, well, can you educate me so that I'm aware? Especially, things you're not used to. Like if you ask somebody if they would like water and they say they want hot water and nothing in it. So that's a cultural thing that you have to get used to with different backgrounds. Some backgrounds will like cold water. Some people want hot water with their meals. So, I will usually ask, and I'll gain knowledge through asking. If you don't ask, then you don't know, and then you're going to make the same mistake when a similar situation arises. Generally, the nursing assistants and the phlebotomists and the patient care techs at our hospital are all in school, so I try to utilize that because they are so eager to learn and they're eager to to please, and they're excited about what they're doing, and they can't wait to get their nursing school. So I use that as my avenue to keep them connected and keep them locked in. And, you know, if you ask questions, they'll be asking you questions, and you build a rapport and a dialogue, and it's usually a good working environment if you can do that.
Okay. So how do you handle suggestions and feedback when negotiating changes and improvements, whether it's with a nurse aide or whether it's a charge nurse talking to you, or if you're a charge nurse that day, how would you handle that?
As a floor nurse, giving feedback to a nursing assistant or any ancillary staff can be very uncomfortable and trying. It's not very easy to tell somebody that they didn't do something correct because it's falling on your license and it's making you look bad and the patient's complaining, and it can really snowball into some big thing just because, you know, you didn't take that step and talk to that person. I generally will lay out my expectations for what I want that person to do when they're in that room, and if they don't, then I will speak with them, and then if I have to go to the next level, then I'll go to the next level, so that it becomes a management thing and not a nursing assistant thing, because that becomes very difficult to work with that person later on. And I mean, who knows? You know, they say it takes 7 errors to get to a big mistake. So you try to keep that in mind. If you have a patient complaining and it's something big and it's a fall or it's a medication error, there were 7 things they say that happened prior to that big error that happened. And if you can stop at error number 3, then you won't get to error number 7. So communication is a big tool. When I was charge nurse on at a facility, I had to oversee 3 units. And staffing and, you know, issues, and then patient issues. And if your staff is strong, and if you have a good staff on, and you have good leaders in that staff, and you praise your staff well, and you get in there at 7 o'clock, you know they're leaving, and you have nurses who are new and they need help and they're struggling, it builds cohesiveness amongst your team. And if you have a good, strong team, then you have a good, strong shift.
And last question is, would you describe yourself as a servant leader? And yes, how can you give an example of your ability to display this trait?
I believe I consider myself a servant leader. I try to look at all aspects of a patient's care. I try to pull in as many people as I can. An example for me would be my hospice patients, or my patients who are dying or are terminal or aren't expected to live very longer. It's a very sensitive issue to my heart. I just, something I try to remember that this is, you know, somebody's family member, somebody's last days on this earth, and I try to do it right. I try to help that family do what they need to do so they can live with it the rest of their lives because they're here. I've gone as far as to ask administration to block a room. The hospitals these days are moving towards single patient rooms. 3 years ago, not so much. So if you had a patient who was going to die or going to pass or was terminal or was a DNR and we knew death was imminent, it was very hard, A, for that patient, and B, for the second patient in the room. I've gone as far as to ask administration to block a room, even though the hospital was full, so that that patient and that family could have quality private time alone. It's not so easily done. I was fortunate that I had a great supervisor and charge nurse, and they went to bat for me, and death came rather quickly, and the family was very appreciative, and they did realize what the hospital went to do. There was no way that we could have moved that patient to a home environment. I think we have to come a lot farther in our hospice care and our hospice treatment. I think we need to really, hospitals need to really beef that up and be more cognizant that, you know, this is a part of life, and yes, patients do die in the hospital, but we can do it just a little bit better with a little bit more caring and tact. I think we could also, as a servant leader, I'm trying, and I will continue to try to plug in hospice care, palliative care. Try to give options and also then find out what their religious wishes are so I can get that on board. Anything I can do, you know, people have different requests, families have different requests. Sometimes families don't even know what they need. So if you provide it, they have the choice to say yes or no. So do I consider myself a servant leader? Yes, I do. I try to facilitate in anywhere I work, that background. People don't realize all that nurses do. We do a lot besides the bedside, besides the medical aspect, besides being a patient advocate. We wear so many hats, and then we are responsible for so many other things, including lab values and procedures and education.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. This thing didn't quit recording or something on me.
I'm not doing it over, Jared.